All right, variables are containers that. All right, well, shortcuts ain't working, so I'm gonna just use the window panel. So I'm gonna open up your actions panel. Your actions panel is where you write all your ActionScript code, all your interactivity and all that. In order to create a variable, you simply type in the word var, you do a space, and then whatever the variable name is. All right. Now, you have to data type the variables. A data type is a specific to let Flash know what type of variable it is. If it's going to be a number, if it's going to be a boolean, a string, an array, and we're going to get into all of that stuff. The reason why you do this is going to help you when you're debugging the code. So, if, for instance, you say you want to do a variable of a type string, and a string is just like a text, right? And we're going to do the famous "Hello World," blah blah blah, right? And then you want to take that variable and say you want to change it later on. And you try to say, well, my var is going to become a number. It's going to spit out an error telling you, hey, no, you can't because this variable is supposed to be a string. It'll keep your code organized, and it'll give you error checking right away. There's different types of data types. The main ones that you're going to use are going to be the string, the number, boolean, and arrays. I didn't have array on the list, but those are the main ones that you're going to use. There's plenty of other ones, and they're on the handout that I gave. But those are the main ones that you're going to be using on a regular basis, and we're going to get into all of those. So a string is just that. You say var, you create the variable, the name of the variable, the data type, right? Well, again, whether it's a number, string, array, etc. And then what the variable is. You do not always have to declare what the variable contains. There are times where you're going to just want to create the variable, and later on you want to give it its value. All right, so for instance, you're doing something, and based on a user's action, then that variable will become something. All right. All right. Naming conventions. When you are doing a variable, variables cannot have spaces. You can't start them with numbers. If you want to do like my space var, the way you want to do is you want to put an underscore, and hopefully this will work. That's the way you do your spacing if you want to do a variable. The industry standards and best practices says you start with a lowercase. So for instance, if it says my, and then the next word is var. So if I want to say Julio Vargas is going to be my variable, I'm going to type Julio capital Vargas, like that. That's called camel casing. That's how you do your naming convention. That's going to be the same thing for like functions and everything else we do, with the exception of classes when we get into that. All right. Commenting. Commenting is very, very, very important. I mentioned this last week. I'm a stickler for commenting. Sometimes I'm even a victim myself where I don't get to comment everything. But you comment as you code. The reason for that is if Izzy's working on a project and all of a sudden he's got to get off the project for something else he might have worked on. Let's say Zamir needs to work on it. He can pass the project up to Zamir, and Zamir is going to be able to read the comments and know what everything does, and he can work on the project. How do you do a comment? There's different there's multi-line commenting and there's single-line commenting. You would do a single line. You say this is a variable name, right? That's a single. Oops. Variable name. That's a single-line commenting. You do 2 slashes and then the actual comment. Multi-line commenting is simply you do your little asterisk, asterisk, /, and then your commenting will go in here. That's where you do your commenting. This type of commenting is called Java doc commenting. We're gonna get into like heavy commenting later on, but just so you know that this is called Java doc commenting, and with this you can like add parameters and all like or things like that. So when we do like a documentation of a project or our classes, Flash or the AS doc engine will read all those commenting and put a nice HTML file for you with all the commentings and what the actual code is. That's much later on. So you have your single line commenting, which is 2 slashes, your multi-line commenting, which is that. I do my function commenting a little different. Go back. All right. Normally what I do is if I'm going to write a function, right, I'll write my function and then whatever it is. And again, camel case commenting. All right. And this is going to lead into the next thing. How do I go back? So
What are you trying to do?
Make this go back. There's no like backspacing. So I have to. No, but I want to make the curly bracket come over this side. Oh, there's no backspacing. Okay, cool. But this is what I want to do. Okay, so normally when I do my function, and this is just a matter of preference, what I do is I'll take this and I'll make a big block, right? What this does is when you have an ActionScript file and it's very long, 300, 400, 1,000 lines of code, right? This will make it stand out among all the code. So this is like my function comment. That's what I do. You might want to pick this up. You might find your own little way of doing it. I find this is very useful because again, it pops out in the code. All right, functions. Functions are blocks of code. They actually do exactly that. They actually run a function, something. So for instance, if I go and I say trace, right? And in this case, I'm going to trace the variable Julio Vargas, right? Now, if I run this, nothing happens in my output panel, right? Now, if I want to use that function, I have to call that function. I'm going to copy and paste this. Now it says hello world. Oops. You see there, it says hello world. What did that do? What I did is I created a variable, and as I said, I used it later on. All right, so anytime you want to say hello world to everybody, you just call the function, all right, and it'll just run whatever you tell it to do here. Now, code formatting. This is a matter of preference, I think, for users that are starting out and individuals who are not familiar with programming. As you can see where I put my curly brace here and then I put this one here. Another way that you might see if you look through the internet is individuals who might go and they might put it here. I particularly don't like that format because as you can see everything starts getting a little bit jumbled up here. Others may have come here and put a space, which is better to read. But for the most part, what I found is that they'll do this, and then if you have a whole bunch of things so you have a bunch of code, and you have that, then it becomes all jumbled up. Where if it has this, then you know what the function is, and it has nicely spaced out, and it's much more readable. Now, if I run this, guess what's going to happen? If I run this, nothing happened. Wow. Nothing happened. Because why? Because I have to call the function. Right? And the way you call your function is you do the function name, open, close parentheses, and a semicolon at the end. It calls it multiple times.
There's another way to call your function,
right? No. Once you create the function, the only way to call it is by using its name. And I mean, you can create if you we're not gonna get into like ActionScript on frames. We're gonna introduce you guys to doing your ActionScript in separate ActionScript files. But you can call functions in that manner. If you put a function name and an ActionScript, for instance, if I wanted to use this, right? What's my timeline? So right now it's on the frame, which I should have used. But if I come down here, oof, these shortcuts. Where's your F5? On extend.
On insert. Okay.
Oh, it works for that one. Okay, so what I did is I hit F5, it extends the timeline, and then F6 inserts a keyframe. And this one here, if I do this, see, F9 doesn't work for that. I don't know.
It's not my fault, man.
9 through
I
12.
don't use F9. It opens up like the different panels and stuff like that. That's pretty.
All right, so if I want to call my function name, and I'm doing this just for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to put it on that frame. I'm going to come here, I'll put my function name, and I run this. See, when it gets to that frame, then it'll call that function. The only reason why that worked is because it's also on the same exact timeline. If it were on a separate timeline, it wouldn't work. You would have to actually come out of the timeline to wherever that timeline is. And as you can see, it keeps calling it because the playhead is running, gets to the end, starts again, keeps running, gets to the end, starts again, and it keeps calling it over and over. Any questions so far? Again, I'm going to go slow, basic, simple. I can't even right click on this guy. Jesus.
Apple tab.
What?
What do you keep hitting Apple tab?
Well, I'm trying to right click.
Control.
Control.
Alright. Bear with me. Alright, cool. So we know about variables, data types, naming conventions, commenting functions. Functions and methods are the same thing. Functions are when you're working in a procedural format and you're not working in a class structure, and we're going to get into classes later on. When you're working in class, functions are called methods, and we'll probably use the word back and forth in different ways. But it's all the same thing. Parameters, okay. Parameters are arguments that you can pass to a function. So say I want to trace. Let's put a trace. Let's say st, and this is a type string, right? The data type is a string, all right? And then I'm going to call st, right? Because this is what I put in here. This is my parameter or my argument that I'm passing to my function, right? And then I want to trace whatever is being passed to that particular function, all right? Now, if I want to use that function, all right, and I want to pass it a parameter, say I want to pass Julio Vargas to that parameter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call my function, right? And I'm going to say Julio Vargas, right? What that does is going to say, okay, I'm passing this particular argument to this function, right? Arguments or parameters are the same thing, right? So when this runs, it's still going to do the same thing. It's still going to trace hello world. Everybody got that? Because all I'm doing is grabbing this and then passing it to this function. Got it? So I'm passing it right here, in between the brackets, I'm passing it there. So for instance, if I create one that says var, I don't know, flash. Oop, can't do that. That's a reserved word. We can't do that. Give me a variable name.
Mac.
Mac. All right, and let's say Mac is a string, right? And then, all right.
Liar.
So now I can continue to reuse this function. All right, so now I'm going to pass Mac to this instead, right? You get it? So that's what it is, parameters. And you can have multiple, bunch of different functions. So let's say I want to do both of those, right? So let's say I write st2, and st2 I'm just using it because it's a string. All right, now I want to do that, and I want to pass. Oop. Why? I have to trace it, right? I have to put it out. Trace is a nice kind of little debugging tool that it has, that Flash has built in. And there you go. So you can pass multiple parameters. How is this useful? Say you want to create your own class or your own little function that always makes something, the opacity of a movie clip or something, to 0. Let's try something like that. This is white. Alright, so function f8 is going to create a new symbol and just call this box. Alright, so there it is. Now we're going to give it an instance name, which is the next thing we're going to talk about, with this box. Alright, So now I'm going to go here. And now that's going to be of a data type movie clip. And in the handouts, it explains all of this. So now what I want to do is I want to take and I want to say whatever that one is, right? In this case, this is not proper, right? Because it's not a string. And this is things that I just use. You'll get comfortable with your own. So now I want to do MC.alpha 0, right? We're not using any of this. So now I want to take that box and I want to make its alpha 0. How would I do that? I'm going to grab the function, right? And I'm just copy and pasting for being quick. And I'm just going to pass that argument to this function. Sorry, I have a habit of saving consistently. There it is, you can't see it, right? Because we put the opacity to 0. So if I change this to 0.3, that's another thing between AS2 and AS3, the values are 0 and 1. And AS2 is like, 0 to 100. And there's the opacity to 0.3. So whenever if you have some sort of a tweening engine, which we'll get to later on or something like that, you can create functions that do all these little things. And instead of always going into your properties and alphaing it to 0, you just simply type in the function, give it the movie clip, and it'll take the property. And this will work for any kind of property, dot x, let's say whatever, 400, and I don't have to tell it just one time, and then it's going to move it. All right. Any questions so far? Okay, how do we communicate between symbols? You guys use this a lot in your banners. You guys have like nested movie clips, one movie clip inside another movie clip inside another movie clip. All right, how are we gonna do that? All right, so here's box, and here's my second box. All right, I'm gonna call this box 2. And naming instance names are also the same. You follow the same rules as you using variables. You don't start with numbers. There's no spaces. You want to use camel case, and if you want to use a space, you use an underscore. So this is called box 1, and this is called box 2. All right. So you want to tell box 2 for box 1 to do something. We're gonna go into that movie clip's timeline, and everybody knows what timelines are and all that stuff, right, Ruben? All right, cool. So I'm gonna put another layer here. I'm gonna call it AS for ActionScript, right? I'm gonna go here, and I'm gonna say object, right? And I'm gonna explain to you guys. Dot box dot x equals. All right. What does this do? It's gonna say I want to target an object, right? This object's parent, right? What is that? That's like going root dot. That's going out 1, right? So this object's parent, which is the main timeline, right? The main timeline is still a movie clip. In AS2, the main timeline was not a movie clip. It was like a root. It was like a document, like a stage. In this case, in AS3, the main timeline is a movie clip. So I'm saying, in this case, I'm saying this object's parent. All right, so I'm going out 1, and then I'm targeting the box, and I'm telling it take its x and make it 400. And there it is. It moved it. So you can see where it started. There, see, moved it to 400. All right. Now, as I mentioned on Friday, everything in Flash is an object. Anything you use, any classes, anything you create is an object. You can think as your objects as like little movie clips, but when you get into like classes and all that, they're really not going to be movie clips. They're classes. All right. That's how you communicate. So if you had even if you had another one in here, right? So you created another box in here, whatever. Let me call this. Now, why does this work? Even though this one is already called box 2. No, that's not gonna work actually because it's the same instance. This one box 3. All right. So if I want to target this one has another movie clip called box 3. If I want to target that one from within your movie clip, I'm simply gonna go box dot box 3 dot x equals, and I moved it all the way to that side. All right. So the way you can look at this syntax, right, is called a dot syntax. And that's like, say, if you ever work with when you're in your Mac and you're working with the servers, that's almost like doing this, doing your slashes. This damn thing. Sorry. That's like doing your slashes. This is how Flash sees this stuff. So it's going to go here and here, so like kind of like a directory structure. And that is the same way you work when you're working with your classes. Everything's all using dot syntax. And again, make sure you get your naming conventions correct. Now, one of the cool things about Flash is that, once you create a symbol one time, you can reuse it 1,000 times, and it's always only going to download it one time. So I could have multiples of these, and it's not going to make a difference to the file size if I can get this right. It's not going to make a difference. Anybody have any questions? All right. So are you all comfortable with using trace? You know what trace does? Yeah. All right. So here is my symbol. I'm going to do trace, and I'm going to say mc.x. Is this going to work?
No.
Why not?
Function name?
Because what?
The name?
No. This is not going to work. Why? Because I haven't passed anything. I haven't passed anything to this function. So remember that this function requires one argument or parameter, right? So if I were to do this, it's going to give me an error. You see? Incorrect number of arguments. Expected 1. Now, Flash is terrible. Unless you've been working it for a while, it's terrible at letting you know exactly. This is like one of those few occasions that it literally tells you exactly what it is. But what it spits out as errors or anything like that is like all cryptic. And you're like, what the hell does that mean? But you'll get used to it once you work with it more and more. So what am I going to pass to that one? What am I going to pass to that argument, to that function? What argument is it expecting? It's expecting some sort of a movie clip, right? Remember that we data typed this to a movie clip. So it's expecting a movie clip to be passed to this particular function. So now what we have to do, we have to pass it box, right? And there you go. It moved it, and then it traced 400. Now, what if I would tell it to do Julio Vargas? Will it work?
You would have to change it in the top as well.
On the top where? Up here?
No,
Function name?
the function name.
To what?
Really works.
To string.
Exactly. Exactly.
Hey,
Why? Because this is expecting a movie clip, right? Right? Now, this isn't going to work, right? Because the string doesn't have, and we're going to get into properties, doesn't have a property of alpha and doesn't have a property of x. So this is not going to work. So what am I going to do? Say you want to do in testing or you want to debugging and you want to trace something, right? So simply what I do is what I showed you guys. I do a multi-line commenting, right? And I comment all that out. So when that's that way, Flash will not run this, right? Now if I want to trace, and remember about naming conventions, this is necessarily is not correct because it's not an MC, but for the purpose of this example, we'll leave it as that. We're going to trace MC. And there it is. So what you always have to remember is whatever type of argument you tell a function to expect, you have to make sure that you send it that correct type of object. Now I can still go here and still do the box, right? So let's change this to, you know, how it should be. Let's say it's a string, and then, you know, the next one is going to be MC, right? And it's of data type movie clip, right? Now this would work, and I will have to change this to what? ST. Okay, incorrect number of argument expected too. What happened there? No, it's not that I didn't call the trace.
You call it movie clip. Or at the bottom, no?
Where at the bottom here?
Yeah, don't you have to call it movie clip?
I have to pass it. That's called passing.
Sorry.
Yep, that's all right. It's called passing. I have to pass it the actual type, again, type of argument that it's expecting. All right, you okay, Izzy?
You just pretty much trace to test stuff, right?
Yeah. When you're debugging, you trace stuff. You want to know, like, if you're moving something, say 400 pixels, you know, and it's not happening, then you say trace MC.x and you see where it is, you know, and it'll tell you, oh, it's over here. So now you know it's either behind like another object, or you didn't add it to the display list, which we'll get into, or anything like that. It's you use it for a number of different things. Like you can have multiple trace statements, you know. You do a comma and you want to say MC.alpha, right? And that's gonna give you the actual properties. So right now it's there, and then you told it to alpha to 0.3. So now it's gonna tell you, okay, it's 400, 0.3, and you're tracing hello world. So this is you're gonna like live and die by this until we get into using like the debugger, and even then you're gonna live and die by the trace statement, because this will, you know, otherwise, you know, you won't know where things are. You know, you don't know what's happening, or you're gonna run into a lot of problems in your code, and to debug you're gonna use the trace statement. Now you notice I've been using the semicolon. This is how you terminate or end some sort of argument or some sort of execution or anything like that. Now I want you guys to always use it. Flash will work, as you can see, without it. It is not 100% mandatory, but it's not considered good convention. So you guys want to use that all the time. Not only that, but you run into a problem. Let's say you start using a switch statement, or you start using like for loops or something, and you forget to add that, you will run into problems. So just get into the habit of always ending your statements with the semicolon. All right. Let's see what else. All right, so here we're gonna do something different. We're gonna get a little bit of head, because it looks like you guys got this stuff. Ruben, you all right?
I'm good.
Everybody's all right? Good. Wampy, you all right? Oh, I just want to make
You have
sure.
this in Spanish or?
This is automatically translating. It's auto-translating. All right, so I'm gonna grab all of this, right? I'm getting it out of here, and now what I'm gonna do is, we're moving up a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take it out of there, and I'm gonna create it, and I'll put it in a separate ActionScript file, right? So I'm gonna go File, New, right? ActionScript 3.0, ActionScript 3.0 class. Hit OK. Class name, right? That's new. That's main. It's gonna be my main class, and there it is. Oh, that's nice. It does that now. Creates a nice class stuff. Now you see how it did it here. What I was telling you guys. I don't like that, so I'm gonna move it the way I like it, the way I feel like it's much more readable. All right. Now, if I were to take the code that I did and drop it right in here, highlight that, pressing tab to bring it in. Remember code formatting all the time. Let's pull this out. Let's open this up. All right. We're not going to need this one because we're no longer working in the Flash IDE. Now, this is what's called a class, right? I'll save this later. A class has a few things. As you saw when it started with this information, right? This is the package. The package is what I explained to you guys on Friday. It's like a sort of like a box that contains a bunch of other classes in there that do specific things. All right, think of it like a grocery bag, you know, and you have like all your apples and all your seasonings and stuff in there. So the package is actually the big. This is the actual name of the actual class. Classes must start with a capital letter. At all times, they must start with a capital letter. It's the naming convention. Naming convention. And your constructor. This is here is called your constructor. So you have your package, your class name or class definition, and then your constructor. All right, your constructor must be named the same way as well. So if you had a package and your package was like, you know, com, right, and this is a folder structure dot .var, right, then your package must live in that directory structure. All right, this is your constructor. All right, I'm going to drop the code back in here. Now, how do I use this? How does Flash know to use this code? It has no idea that this code even exists because we did it in an external ActionScript file, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to save this. Can I put this on the desktop?
Of course.
Right, and it already says main because you know I figured out what the name was. So I named it main. So there is main, and main.as. That's what it's called. Blah blah blah. All right. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go back to Flash, and we're gonna go back to Flash, and we're gonna go back to Flash.
You gotta make that window smaller. You're a flash.
Hmm.
You gotta close that window. Yellow.
All right. Cool. Now, if I run this code, nothing's gonna happen, right? No output window, nothing's moving, that thing's not working. Why? Because what we need to do is attach that class to this particular main file, and that's called the document class. That's something new that was introduced in I believe CS4 or CS3, one of those two. Where do you do that? You do that here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna type main, right? Because the name of that class was called main. And that's also like a naming convention, an industry standard that your main class is called main. You know, you might see other things where people might not do it, but as best practice, you want to call it main. Now, if you look at this here, it says a definition for the document class cannot be found in the class path. Why? Because it's trying to look for it. We haven't saved this file, right? So it has no idea where to look for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this, and I'm going to save it the same name on the desktop. It's called main. Now, if I do this and I click back out of it, you get no error. Because we saved it, Flash knows exactly what it is. If you hit the little pencil here, it's going to come and it's going to bring it up. So, because it found it. If I were to, say, misspell it, have the wrong package or something like that, and I hit the little pencil, you're going to get the same error. All right? So that's just a quick way to make sure that it's found the class and if you want to work with it or whatever. All right, now if I run this, right? It's still not working. Okay, you see here, it says, here are the errors. Call to a possibly undefined method add frame script. What the heck that means? You know, the class main must subclass flash display that movie clip since it is linked to a library symbol of that type. What the hell does that mean? Nobody knows what the hell that means unless you've been working it for a while. The first one, the first one is this one here, is the package, right? It says, okay, well, you know, there's no package defined, which is fine. We can leave that as it is for this purpose. All right, the second one, it says must subclass. And when we get into classes, you're going to know what subclassing is for. But for the purpose of this example, we're going to subclass it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to extend movie clip. Why? Because the main timeline is a movie clip, right? So the movie clip is a built-in class that comes with Flash. And Flash has a lot of built-in classes that you're going to be using. So we're extending that class. So we're going to be using all its properties and all its methods from that class. All right? So now when I run this, all right? Let's go back. Should give you another error. Save this. And did I save this? Okay. I got to save it. Always make sure you save definition. Okay, now the next error you get. The definition of base class movie clip was not found. Why? You told it to extend it, right? But it has no idea where it is. right? So you have to import any classes and any packages that you want to use, right? So I'm going to go import Flash, and again, I only know this because I've been working with this forever, so I know where everything is at, more or less. What the hell? All right. So now I'm saying I want to import. This is the package, flash that displays the package. All right, and the class that I want to extend is movie clip, or I want to use that particular class from that package. All right, so I have to save it, come here, run it, and there it is. All right, so now everything worked just fine. So a few things you got to take from this is, one, make sure that your class is in the correct path that you saved it in. Two is that you can always check it from here. And three, you must import the type of class or package that you want to use. Now,
It's always going to be like that, flash display movie clip.
if it depends on the class you want to use. You know, like for instance, if you want to use like, you know, a text field class to like dynamically generate text fields or anything, then you will import. That's the same way you always type it. You know, import, you know, flash. In this case, let's say text dot text field. Ooh, you know, that's how you import. So I want, in this case, I want to use still from Flash, but the text package, I want to start using methods and properties of the text field class. All right, and this won't harm it in any sort of way because we're not using it yet. So it'll still run and work without any issues. All right, now continuing with the whole code formatting and all that. This is okay, with the exception of like, let's say, the variables and the function. You know, you don't want to be putting your functions within functions. You want to separate them because you want to be able to reuse them. Right? The first thing I want to do is take these variables out of the constructor, right? And I want to make these become global class variables. All right? In this case, they're local variables because they're local to this particular constructor. If this was a function, only the function will have access to it, right? So let's say if I do this, and I get out of here, and I drop this in here, right? So this is local to this particular function, and only this function can access these variables. If you were trying to access these variables somewhere else, say you created another function, oops, so oh, yeah. All right. And I wanted to trace cubic function, and I wanted to trace Julio Vargas, right? No, those are coming out because I have them in the other one. Let's go back here. I gotta get this set up. So, single line commenting, save, run it, right? So now here it tells me access of undefined property Julio Vargas. Access of undefined property Julio Vargas. Why? Because it can't find it because we made it local to that particular function. And that's what access undefined property means. It cannot, you know, it's undefined. You haven't defined this property. You haven't told me what it is. It doesn't know what Julio Vargas is. I don't know, it's cryptic errors, but whatever. So now what I'm going to do, I want to be able to access this particular variable anytime I want. Anytime I want to say, you know, hello world or whatever, I want to take that variable. I'm going to take both of these out, and I want to put it out here, right? Right after your class definition, you're going to take them and you're going to drop them in there. And now what this has become a global class variable. So now if I want to trace that, let me get this out of here. Didn't work. Why? Oh, there you go. Okay, why didn't that work? That didn't work because I never called this function. So I'm gonna copy, and inside my constructor, I'm gonna call it, and this is how you call a function all the time. And call it, and if I go here, there goes hello world. Alright, so you guys learned a few things. You got your variables, your naming conventions, your code formatting, right? Functions, parameters. We got a little bit ahead to next week with the document class because everybody seems to have gotten it. You have your arguments and your parameters, and the handouts have, you know, more detail on that. And you have your class, your constructor, your document class, and all that stuff. Any questions? I don't want to go too further, but anybody lost about anything?
You could call the function from anywhere in that section. You just put it up there, but you could do it down
Yes,
below.
this doesn't matter. I can take this function and call it down here, and it doesn't matter. Another thing is that I have mentioned is you don't want to do this. You don't want to make a function inside a function. You want to keep your functions. In this case, we're working with classes, so what they're called methods. You want to make sure that, you know, those are separate. So if I take next function and I call it there, and then it doesn't matter where you call it. It does matter where you call it. In this case, it doesn't matter where you call it. But Flash reads from top to bottom, left to right when it starts compiling. And even though you have this a string, and you voided your method and all that, at the end of the day, it's going to strip all this out. It's more for your debugging purposes and for sanity when you're developing and all that. Now I could still go over here and create another, let's say, private function, and we'll get into private and all that later on. And I can take this function, drop it in here, and then call this function. This is why, you know, it is very important that you understand functions and methods, because I mean they're extremely powerful and you can't do anything without them. There goes hello world. So what did that do? That simply, all I did was created another function that calls this function. And this function traces Julio Vargas. And why did that work? Because we made a global class variable up here, right after your class definition.
And it has to be up there for it to be global, right?
That's correct.
If it's nested anywhere else, it has to be directly after the global class.
That's correct, and that is the key word. If you nest that within any other function, you're not. I mean, it's only going to be local to that particular function or method.
And why did you do the second function as private?
Okay, that's a little bit wrong. Private meaning that it's only accessible to this particular class, and only this class can use that function. If you make it public, when we start getting into extending classes or using methods and properties from other classes, then you must declare your functions public so that everything else can use it. Other classes and other things can use it. All right. I hope I didn't confuse nobody. Everybody's okay with that? Any other questions? Global class variables, code formatting, data type string. You know, if this could be a number. Oops, not a number, but a number. You know. This could be 10. I want to trace that. I'm going to go to this here. Trace. Right. Save. Run. And that's another thing. If sometimes you forget to save and you run it, it's not working. You're like, what the hell's going on? You start going crazy. It's because you haven't saved it. And there goes 10.
Don't forget your semicolon.
You're right. She's right. Don't forget my semicolons. Don't get sloppy, Julio. All right. Any questions? Very important, this part here with the document class. That's how it attaches it. If I were to take this class now, we have it here, and can I create a folder? All right. And I drop that main AS class in there. What do you think is going to happen? It's not going to find it. That's correct, because it no longer is there. Nothing works. If I try to do this, it's going to say it created a new one. And that's just a feature that Flash has that I don't like, particularly unless you're working with library symbols, and we'll get into that, but I don't like that it does that. Now I went to save. It doesn't know where I'm supposed to save it. I'm going to save it in there, save as. Now if I want to use that class, all I simply have to do here in this case is go here, type in Julio.main, save, always save, and guess what? The name of the package does not reflect the location of the file. Remember what I was telling you about packages? So now we go here, and what I have to do? I have to put Julio, right? That's the package. It's in that folder, so to speak.
You wrote Julio originally because that was the name of the folder, correct?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct. And there it is. So now I know it's in the Julio folder, dot, and then the name of the class. That's all she wrote, folks. Any questions, comments, concerns? All right, guys. See you guys on Friday. Make sure you read your documentation. Thank you for coming. Ruben, it's been an honor.
Thanks for having me. I have to leave with it now.